Alright everyone, we're going to finish up our discussion of budget constraints. In class, we parameterize the budget constraint with an income of $10, a price of good X, $2, and a price of good Y, $1. So if we'll put the 1 right there. And I told you to plot it, because we're going to have to get comfortable drawing graphs in this class, so this is a great one to start. One way to plot lines is to solve for the intercepts and then connect the dots. So what I mean by solve for the intercept is it's helpful sometimes to look at the line with the dependent variable as a function of the independent variable. So we can solve this to be y equals 10 minus 2x. And now we can really get our intercepts out. So the way to solve for intercepts is to plug in 0 for one of the variables and solve for the other. So in this case, if I plug 0 in for x, right, what's my intercept? It's 10. The other way to think about that is by looking at the budget constraint. If I don't buy any x, if x is 0, if I'm not buying any of good x, what's the maximum number of y that I can afford? It's 10. There you go. So let's do the opposite to get the other intercept. If I don't consume any y, put a 0 in for y, what's the maximum amount of x I can buy? Well, divide 2 out and you can see that if I have $10 and x is $2, I can get 5. I like to go ahead and draw my axes to scale. To try to help scale them, I put the maximum value on each, but this line is going to look something like that. There's our budget constraint. Cool? Alright, now let's play around with this a little bit more. I'm going to give you 3 values, and we're going to think about the budget constraint a little more critically. So, bundle A, bundle B, and bundle C, X, Y. So, bundle A is 4 and 2. Bundle B is 2 and 5. And bundle C is 2 and 6. So we can go over here to our budget constraint. 4 and 2. Here's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's 2. Point A is going to lie on the budget constraint. We can see that by plugging in. If I buy 4 units of X, I spend $8. If I buy 2 units of Y, I spend 2. 8 plus 2 is 10. So I'm going to be on that line. B is not going to be on that line. If I buy 2 units of X, I spent $4. 2 times 2 is 4. If I buy 5 units of Y, I've spent $5. 5 plus 4 is only $9. Haven't spent all my money. So, point B is going to be inside the budget constraint. So let's go over here to 2 and 5. 1, 2, 3. There's 2. There's 5. There's point B. And lastly, point C, 2 and 6. What do you think? Try to solve it out. Is that on the budget constraint? $2 spent on good X is 4. 6y cost us $6, so we're on the budget constraint again at 2 and 6. Right there at point C. And so the reason I wanted to illustrate these points is what the budget constraint tells us graphically is that the individual can afford to buy all combinations of X and Y along that line as well as inside. Right, you recall at point B they've only spent $9. So all these points in here are going to be situations in which they've not spent all their money. So yes, they can afford those bundles. Everything along the line is going to be where the consumer is spending all of their money on those combinations of goods. What that means is in the space out here, the individual is not going to be able to afford those bundles. So for example, the individual cannot buy 5 units of Y and 5 units of X because that would cost $5 for Y and $10 for X. $15 total, and the individual does not have that much income. So these bundles, these points out here, we're not going to be able to get to them. Alright, so the question we're ultimately interested in is if the individual can afford all these bundles on the budget constraint or inside of it, which ones are best? Which bundle does the consumer want to consume? And so let's rule out a few of these. My first question to you is why not B? Think about the two principles of utility that we've learned. Why would the individual not choose B at 5 units of Y and 2 units of X? Pause the video and see if you can answer that on your own. The individual is not going to choose point B because they're not spending all of their income, and we have that principle that more is better. If the individual doesn't have to give up anything to consume more, in other words, they've got money sitting in the bank and they don't have to give up consumption of some other good, they just take that money and they spend all of it. So, optimal bundles are not going to be the ones on the inside of the budget constraint. The individuals are going to spend all of their money, and so it's going to be either C or A or some other bundle on there that maximizes the individual's utility. They're going to have to spend all their money to get the most utility. Now let's consider, so why not B? They have income left over. And more is better. Now I want you to think about the principles the two principles we wrote down about utility again, and tell me why it's not likely good A. Think about the principles that we have written down, just the two of them. Why is it not likely to be good A? Pause the video and see if you can answer that on your own. The reason the individual is not going to choose A, likely, is because of diminishing marginal utility. I'm going to abbreviate marginal utility MU. Remember, as I consume, in class we talked about ice cream scoops, as I consume more and more scoops of ice cream, I get smaller gains to utility. If I'm spending all of my money on good X, then that fourth unit might have a pretty small utility. Whereas if I'm consuming somewhat of a mix of the two, I might have a higher marginal utility for X and a higher marginal utility Y. So what diminishing marginal utility does is kind of rule out the extremes. Individuals aren't likely to consume all of one good and nothing of anything else because of diminishing marginal utility. So it might be good C is more optimal. Good C might give them more utility. When we start the next video, which is the beginning of chapter 6, we're going to do better than that. We're going to be able to say which bundle of goods is the optimal bundle, which one gives them the highest utility. But that's it for the budget constraint for now.